the fellowship relies on, and the future fellowship and the Academy's new strategy, which you'll know was circulated, published this week, is that we want to continue to build a diverse, inclusive and broad-ranging fellowship of the Academy for the future. And we've done quite well on doing that to date, diversifying the Academy, but it all depends on the pool of candidates that we have, because we can only elect fantastic people to become fellows of the Academy if we have a very high quality and large and diverse and inclusive pool of nominated individuals. So we absolutely sort of rely on that, and we're wanting to do a number of things to really encourage future nominations. And of course, nominations relies on fellows doing the work of nominating. And so this is about trying to help everybody understand, you know, how best to do that, how we can optimize those nominations, and how best that you all can support wonderful individuals to be put forward for election to the Academy. So that's the purpose of today. We have great attendance, that's really good. We have a great selection of people with us today. We have members, staff of the Academy, Nick Hillier, Director of Communications and Engagement, Holly Rogers, who's Head of Engagement, Rabana Hussain, who is Regional Engagement Manager, Russell Crennden, who is coordinates the whole of the fellowship election process and is going to be talking to us as well, Vivien Kintu, who leads the Academy on Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, and Julia Turan, Digital Communications Manager. We're also joined by our regional champions, Tim Aitken from Scotland, David Beach, Yorkshire and Humberside, Dame Nikki Cullum, who's not terribly well today with COVID, but is here. So thank you for joining us nonetheless from the Northwest, and Danny McCauley from Northern Ireland, whose roles it is to support and coordinate nominations and to try and get the regional representation of nominations up, which is very important to us. And we also have members of sectional committees who have very immediate and real experience of how the committees look at the nominations, and they can offer some advice into this. So thank you all for joining us. We're going to take about 2 hours. We will have a break, and we're also going to have some group discussion work after our break, which you will all be able to contribute to, and hopefully we'll also use what comes out of those conversations usefully to improve our processes and the guidance we can give for the future. So that's by way of introduction. I'm now going to hand over to Rabana, who's just going to talk to us about regional developments. Rabana.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the masterclass today. My name is Rabana Hussain, and I've recently been appointed as the Regional Engagement Manager for the Academy. My role is very new. There's never been an engagement manager before, and I think that demonstrates a clear commitment from the Academy for wanting to engage more with fellows regionally. This also forms a key part of the recently launched strategy, which includes wanting to work more closely with fellows regionally and across the country. And we're keen to work with you all, together with the regional champions, to undertake more activities to enable you and the Academy to have more of an impact regionally. And one of the ways that we're hoping to do that is by working more closely with our regional champions, some of whom are with us today. We have a total of 10 regional champions allocated across the country. All of their details are available on our website, together with their contact details. And essentially, regional champions are our eyes and ears, if you like, on the ground in terms of feeding information back to the Academy on topics that the Academy should be involved in or perhaps should have a voice on, and equally letting fellows know regionally what the Academy is doing and some of the good work that's taking place across each of our departments. So I would strongly encourage any of you, if you don't know who your regional champion is at the moment, please do go and have a look on the website and reach out if you can, if you want to network with them, and also find out if you have any mutual collaborations that you might want to work on. Further on in the masterclass, we were talking about nominations, and as Jessica said, we're quite keen to get more of a diverse population when it comes to our fellows. So if you have any ideas on how we can do that, we'd also welcome your suggestions. Regional champions play an important part in regional activity. We have regional champions that are coming to the end of their term. If you are interested in being a regional champion, or if you want to know a bit more about the remit, please do get in touch with me or try and identify who your regional champion is. As I say, my details are available as well on the website, and if you do have any information on how you'd like to work with us collaboratively, please do let me know. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies, I've got a noise in the background, but I'm just going to hand over to Russell now, who's going to talk us through the election process.
Thanks, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. I'm sure most of you know me already, but I'm Russell Crennden, Fellowship Manager. I oversee the Fellowship election along with Jessica. And I'm just going to talk very briefly about the actual process itself. I've got a few slides, so give me a moment. Okay, so how do we elect fellows? Well, the criteria for election, the official criteria, is on the screen there. The majority of candidates are selected for an outstanding contribution, so the impact they've made in their particular field of research, that individual contribution that they've made, that's the thing that we try and look for. Not the only criteria. Some people have more of an impact in leadership or management roles, especially if they've moved into that not from publishing so much anymore. And so someone who's interested in the public understanding and appreciation of medical science, or just made a contribution in a different way. But someone who has made some kind of outstanding and unique contribution is what we look for. So, as Jessica mentioned, it's you as fellows who do the nominating. Each candidate must be supported by 3 fellows, but it's the principal nominator who does the bulk of the work. It's responsible for maintaining the nomination. The second and third nominators really are just there to lend their names and support, really. So you as the principal nominator have the main responsibility. Nominations are entered online. We have an online system called Elect, which many of you have used before. We're actually launching a brand new version of Elect for the next election cycle, which I'll touch upon in a bit. But it won't differ too much from the process and the system you've used before. When you've entered these details online, we then ask you to provide some supporting evidence for this candidate, the most important of which is the citation. So this is your chance to make your claim and put your argument forward as to why your candidate should be elected, what they would bring to the academy, and why they would make a good fellow. I would say this is probably the most important part of the nomination. Having a good citation, a well-written citation that makes a very clear argument definitely makes a difference. And we will touch upon citation writing a bit later. There are 4 documents we ask for. The first 2 are linked. So we ask for a list of 10, what's called principal contributions, but basically the 10 best examples of your candidate's work. This can be anything. A lot of the time it's publications, but it literally could be anything. It could be books or patents or computer programs, whatever it is. Anything could be listed in there. And then the accompanying summary of achievements document is where you get to explain those 10 contributions. So what they are, what your candidate's contribution was to that piece of work, the impact it had, and so on. So those 2 are linked. We also ask for a CV and a full publication history. If you have an overseas candidate, We do get a few, not many, but if your candidate is based overseas, then we do ask for an additional letter of contribution where we ask you to explain their ongoing role and contribution to UK science, which is essential to be considered for fellowship. And then the final thing we ask for is if those 10 principal contributions are in the form of publications or similar, then we ask for reprints of those to be uploaded as PDFs. So as I mentioned, the process itself is overseen by Jessica and supported by me. There are 8 sectional committees that assess candidates for election. The decision on where your candidate goes is ultimately up to you as principal nominator, but there is some flexibility, move between committees, between election cycles. So if your candidate doesn't make it through one year and you think they might be better in a different committee the next year, you can move them, but ultimately that decision is yours. So this is what the committees looked like in the last election cycle. You can see the remits there and the chairs, and you'll see that for a few of them, there's a bit of an overlap. So we do see some movement, for example, between committees 2 and 4. So some candidates will move between those 2 committees in particular, and often between committees 6 and 7. Committee 8 there is our newest committee. That's where all our industry and commercial candidates tend to end up now. As I say, it is important to choose the right committee, but there is some flexibility to move during the 5-year candidacy. So here are the key dates of the election year. Next month, you will all be receiving an email from Jessica informing you that the new cycle is open. And this email will contain all the details of how to access ELECT, all the guidelines for nominating candidates. So you'll be getting that in a few weeks' time. Process stays open for nominations over the summer, and the deadline will be the end of September. Once all the nominations are in, all the committees score all the candidates that they've got in their committee in the first round in October, and then in November, the chairs of each committee will meet to decide on a shortlist for the second stage. Normally, there are around 400 candidates in the pool in total, and during the shortlisting stage, we try and get that down to around 100 or so. Peer review takes place at the beginning of the year. We try to get at least 3 reports for each candidate, hopefully more. And the vast majority of these peer reviews will come from the fellows. You will all receive a peer review request from me at some point, that's guaranteed. But we do go out to external non-fellows as well. Once those are all in, each committee will meet in March to go through their shortlisted candidate to see what the reviewers have said, and then decide on their final list that they want to recommend for election. That list then goes to council in April to formally elect the new fellows. But I mentioned, candidates are in the pool for 5 years. So they get 5 goes at getting elected. If at the end of that time they've been unsuccessful, then the candidacy lapses. They can be renominated again in the future, but they have to wait 2 years before they can be so. Now, I put this table on here just to say that one of the key roles as a principal nominator is to update your candidate for every year they're in the pool. This is really important, and you will get prompted over the summer to update your candidate's details. And I can tell you, and I'm sure committee members present here will also say that it can be very frustrating for committee members to view outdated papers. So it is vitally important that you do update your candidate every single year. There seems to be a belief amongst some people that if you don't get in your first year, then that's kind of it, you've got no chance. It's definitely not true. And you can see this table here. This is the 2022 new fellows. This happens every year. This happens in every election cycle. The candidates are elected in every year of candidacy. That happens all the time. So outdated papers really do harm your candidate's chances of success. So please do update those papers. As you can see, people get in all 5 years, plus renominated candidates who've been out and come back again. So that's my slide. So just a brief run through of the process itself. I'm sure you have some questions, but we do have a Q&A session in a bit. So if you could keep those for then, and I'll be happy to answer any questions then. But we'll try and keep to time and save the questions for the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you, Russell. That was really good just to have that that process sort of set out for everybody, because that's the framework by which we work to. So just a few words from me about how to shape a successful nomination from my point of view. I've been both a committee member, a chair, and now in the last year I've sort of actually observed the process all the way through and observed the work of every committee, which has been a really useful thing to do. I think some of the things that Russell's already said, I'm sure other people are going to say, that 300-word statement, which is the citation, is crucial in the way it's crafted. You know, we've got many exceptional people, and the committees make this really, really difficult choice each year as to who of those people are actually going to get taken through to final election. And I think actually that 300-word statement is one of the things that is sort of really assists with some of that decision making. So how can that nomination stand out among all these other amazing people? How has that individual changed the game? How have they directly benefited people and healthcare, even if their work is quite fundamentally, you know, theoretical, science driven, or whatever? Actually, you know, did that work ultimately thread through to changing the game for people and healthcare? I think local impact within a single institution probably is unlikely to be sufficient. And I suppose that you know, what other evidence is that individual has had a wider impact or contribution? It might be through national leadership, or it might be through international leadership in terms of an interest group relating to their discipline, or maybe a wider contribution than that. Have they held national or international roles alongside their excellent science? Have they gone beyond their sort of day-to-day role, their day job, and done more than that and made a contribution beyond it? And I suppose the other thing is, you know, also in crafting this, do get in touch with a member of committee who has seen a number of these and can sort of advise a bit, as well as the regional champion who's got more experience perhaps. And then the 500-word statement, again, I think that's important, and the two things need to link up so that they evidence each other. And then I think the summary of these achievements needs to also reference the publication, so you can sort of read across between the publication list, the top 10, as well as the full publication, particularly the top 10. What of those actually, you know, can be described within the that summary of achievements? I think, yeah, those nominations where the individual has their top 10 outputs, publications, but they also write a short description of each in a couple of sentences, I think that really helps, because again, committees are spanning their insights across a whole range of people, and they're not necessarily expert in the area at all. So anything that helps them see what that particular publication has contributed is really helpful. There is quite a bit of focus on citations and H indexes and things, although I would just remind everybody that the Academy is a signatory of DORA, which means that we shouldn't really rely on those for making our judgments. Actually, committee members will be encouraged to look at the publications themselves and not just think about the venue of publication. So again, those sentences would really help in helping the committee understand why that particular publication, which may not be in the Lancet or the New England Journal of Medicine, but it still has made a very significant contribution. And then a couple of other things. The CV, I guess in our institutions, probably we're very cognizant of things like career breaks that individuals might have, especially from diverse backgrounds. And, you know, where we see that being clearly spelt out in the CV, it's very helpful to the committee because they can take that into account. So I think we're going to do a bit more encouragement of making some of those differences in careers that individuals have had clear to the committee so that they can make a fair judgment. And again, my observation of the way committees work is very fair, very thoughtful, very considered about taking into account all range of evidence. And then a final thing I would say is that, you know, we're also looking for individuals that may bring something different to the academy, that expands the breadth of the fellowship and the different sorts of people that are in the fellowship. So again, you might want to, especially in that 300-word citation, just say what this individual might bring that would add to the fellowship. That's certainly something we talk about and look for. So yeah, lots to think about in the way we're doing it. Those are my thoughts. We'll have a chance to talk more, but I'm now going to turn to Stephen Holgate to tell us about, from his point of view, what a successful nomination looks like. And I'm going to say that I wouldn't be a fellow of the Academy if it hadn't have been for Stephen, who tapped me on the shoulder and said, how about it, and did support me personally through this process. He's one of our most important super nominators, as we describe them, who does just enormously wonderful work, encouraging people to put themselves forward via him into the fellowship, and does it, you know, beyond the institution that Stephen works in. It's a great contribution he makes, Stephen. So over to you to tell us, from your point of view, having seen many of these through, what makes a successful nomination.
Well, thank you, Jessica, very much. And thanks for your kind words, much appreciated. This is the first occasion I think we've ever had the opportunity to talk about all of this. So if my slide with the points I want to make in any way repeat what you've already heard, then maybe, you know, there is something behind it all. But I have to say at the start that I've never sat on a section committee, so I don't really know what the magic kind of criteria are. So my approach to all of this is to try and just use common sense, really, in helping advise individuals. I was a champion, I think, for the southeast of England. So, you know, a few years back when this was set up, we did have the opportunity of discussing the nomination procedure between ourselves. But beyond that, it's my own personal experience. I've just got one slide, if I may show that, and I'll bring that up just to go through some points, because I really don't want to make a long speech here about what one should or should not do, because obviously it's you're going to discuss this in a minute. So let's start with the 500-word summary of achievements. And you can imagine that the section committee and the referees get lots of these to read. So the narrative that goes into that 500 words has got to make compelling reading, really, charting the research career and highlighting, obviously, the individual's achievements. I suppose it's a bit like when you pick up a novel in a shop and turn to the back of the novel and look at the description of what the novel is going to be, and whether you choose to buy that novel or not will, in some aspects, be dictated by the wording at on the back cover. Well, this is about the wording, really, and it's got to read as if it's live, exciting, stimulating, and engaging. And as you go through the summaries, it tracks the career of the individual and highlights individual achievements. These have got to be, of course, backed up, as Jessica said, by evidence, and the evidence is in this top 10 list that we've already heard a little bit about. I think for the narrative, for the kind of summary, it's quite helpful to think a little bit about the structure. What I've always suggested is that the first 2/3 of the space should be dedicated to the research journey, really. And that's obviously going to map onto the 10 publications, not necessarily all of them. But then that last bit, the last, say, 20%, has got to be the pull-through in some ways. The demonstration that the research the individual has undertaken is leading to consequences. And those consequences have, I think, got to really be tangible to the reader, both nationally and wherever possible, internationally, and be accessible and understandable by a non-expert, because the referee or the person who's on the section committee may not be an expert in your field. I also feel it is an opportunity to highlight one or two points of esteem, not a great list, but maybe one or two things that are particularly important in terms of prizes, etc. Then the citation. Well, we've just heard how important the citation is, because it's the key part of the nomination process and should not simply repeat what's in the summary, but pick selected items which shine a light on the achievements of that individual. And basically the question you have to ask yourself is, what would not have happened had this individual not made those contributions? So that's quite an interesting way of looking at all of this. And how has this individual changed the world as a result of what they've contributed? It does, of course, enable you as a citer to be able to make reference to wider contributions, the career development of others, which is important, especially bringing through interdisciplinary type scientists. And then you have an opportunity to highlight again some esteem markers, but hopefully not just repeating what's in the summary 500-word document. Then at the end, as we've already heard from Jessica, just saying how the individual can maybe contribute to the AMS in a special way. The 10 so-called outputs or references, these need to map onto the summary in order. And they can be publications or other outputs, as you've already heard. And as Jessica has said, a sentence or two under each one, just explaining to the non-initiated, non-specialist reviewer what the contribution is really helpful. And I put in brackets, citations can be included only because of what Jessica said, in that this isn't a citation principled process. But, you know, if you've had 10,000 citations, it at least says something about the publication. The CV, this needs to be easily read. It's only a few pages. It's got to have the major career steps, as Jessica mentioned, and the achievements, including prizes and awards. But I mean, there has to be some control over this, and not to stuff it full of material so it actually becomes unreadable. So try and pull out the really principal career progression processes within your curriculum vitae that can be highlighted and catch the eye of the reader. And then the full publication list, well, obviously that's going to depend a lot on the individual. I suppose one can put citations and H indices at the top of all of this, which may say something. And I think it does give an opportunity for expanding beyond just the routine peer review publication in a journal. I mean, it gives you the opportunity to talk about books and other outputs that are significant for your career development. Finally, I'll end by the presentation. I mean, this has got to look professional. You can't have spelling mistakes, and you can't have layout where the kind of lines aren't properly structured, and you know, it's got to look really, really professional. And you know, one of the things that I've found is printing it out. I know I probably shouldn't say this, being an eco warrior myself, but printing it out, somehow a piece of paper accesses a different part of the brain than looking at a computer screen. So I think printing it out is actually quite a helpful thing to do. I wouldn't say print out all of the references, but printing out your summary and the citation and the list of top 10, I think, is probably quite important and helpful when you're trying to pick up errors and make sure that it looks really good. So I'm going to stop at that point, and thank you all very much for hearing my own views on this.
Thanks very much, Stephen. And actually, yeah, the way you've written that, I mean, that I think very useful to see that. Really, really good advice. So thank you. Well, now we're just going to turn to our sectional committee members actually present in the meeting to ask whether any of them would like to, from their point of view, say anything about what they look for when they're assessing candidates. So we have a number of committee members in the meeting. Probably it would just be best to say, would you mind raising your hand, and then we can bring you in. So would any of our committee members like to offer some thoughts? Julia.
Thank you very much. Thank you both, Jessica and Stephen, really helpful. And I certainly agree with everything you've said. I think perhaps one of the important things for candidates to remember is that not everyone on that committee is expert in their work. And I just think that is so important, because sometimes you come across applications which are so detailed, and unless someone on the panel actually understands that, I think sometimes things go down because of that. So I think it's rather, in a way, like thinking about a fellowship application and thinking about the sorts of people who might be sitting around a panel interviewing you when you go along for that fellowship, or indeed when you write a grant application. The mix of people who will be sitting on that committee looking at a grant application. And I'm sure many of us have sat on grant application panels where things have gone absolutely swimmingly, and then someone comes completely from left field, and they're not expert in the field, but actually they raise a point that gets people interested. And then before you know where you are, something that looked as though it was going swimmingly is talked down. So I think there is a skill in making sure that you are not just getting over the science of what you're doing, but you're writing it in such a way that it is accessible to that broad mix of people who are being on the panel. And I don't think it's easy, but I think panels try really, really hard, in my experience, to be as fair as they possibly can be. But it is a very challenging job, because by the time it's got to the shortlisting stage, you're looking at a whole host of really, really good candidates. So it's very, very challenging.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. Yeah, I mean, the standout amongst brilliant people is, I mean, it is very difficult. So that kind of conversation and the material you've got in front of you is all you've got really to work to try and tease this out. So thank you, that's really helpful. John Radford.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. And this year was my first time to be part of Section Committee 5, and that was a very enjoyable experience, and one that really highlighted how excellent the people are who apply, and how difficult it is to try and disentangle these brilliant people from each other. And so I think this just underlines the point about clarity and simplicity, and really highlighting those points that really have made a difference to medical science and healthcare, nationally, internationally, and so on. So I think that would be my comment. Really make an application simple, and all going back to what was just said by Julia, almost bearing in mind that this could almost be a lay summary to explain to the committee what this is all about. Because, as she also said, the committee is made up of different people, all of whom have different experiences. And so drawing it together in a simple and clear way, I think is critical, and also highlighting those points where research has led to changes in practice or outcomes for patients or the experience of patients. I think all of those are absolutely important, and linking through from those 10 best contributions, publications, and the citation into a seamless whole, I think is what candidates should be and their nominators should be trying to do. I think those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. And the idea of simplicity. And although, you know, when you look at the sectional committees and what they're covering, they're not that specialist, actually, are they? They cover a number of fields. And also, you can't rely on committee members knowing the individual by reputation or of their work necessarily. So yes, these nomination papers are the things that are actually going to be used to determine that differentiation. So
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and I was also thinking, I think increasingly also it's not only about the science. The science is kind of the underpinning. Yes, that's got to be there. But we're saying, what else has this person done? What has been the impact of the what else as well as what they've done? Aren't we?
Yeah. And I think, Jessica, that is why, although people get transfixed by H indices, actually that may not be as significant as making a pivotal discovery or a pivotal intervention that makes a difference to patient care and to outcomes and experience. And I think that is the thing that struck me in that committee earlier in this year. What really struck all the people was, oh, this person has done something here that has made a difference, that has added to added to human happiness, as it were. And I think that is what it's all about.
Yeah, I agree. And how can that be conveyed in just a few words? Very, very challenging, but it's very helpful if you can see it straight away. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, John. Now, Joris Veltman, you're going to come in and offer something.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, like John, I'm on the sectional committee only 1 year, and actually was elected only 1 year ago. So somehow made it to sectional committee 2, which is the largest committee. And it was really impressive to see all the excellent candidates. I have just 2 remarks to add to all the good comments which already were made. One of the things that I think is what was discussed quite a bit in our committee was about the role of candidates to a certain, let's say, invention or discovery, because of course that's often critical. Is this person really the leader that drove this, or was this a person which perhaps was more part of the team? And I think it's really important in the application to stress that. So for example, in the top 10 publications, to really indicate the role of the candidate in these publications. I did like very much that we also had some candidates who developed more resources, for example, in bioinformatics. So not only indeed, top scientific discoveries, but really also developing resources which are critical to our field. And I think the other thing that we discussed quite a bit in our committee is how a candidate relates to already elected fellows in the same field. So I think that's also something when you consider somebody, do you think is that person at the same level as fellows who have been already elected in this area? So those are the 3 points that I wanted to make, but I thought the committee was extremely fair, there was no politics, and I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, thank you, Joris. And that thing about, did you lead, were you a member of a team? Again, we shouldn't rely on things like order of a publication to tell us the answer to that, because conventions differ across different specialties, and some of those conventions are changing now, especially with the sort of people that develop amazing platforms but are part of a wide effort, aren't they? So I think that's a really important point. We mustn't rely on those conventions to tell us the answer. We need to be able to read it, see it, feel it somehow in the way things are presented. That's really helpful. So Bill, you're going to reflect for us as well.
Oh yes, so thank you. Well, I've agreed with everything that's been spoken so far. So I've done 2 committee meetings on the neuroscience committee. I'm a basic neuroscientist, and so I think the only words of wisdom I could further add to all the words we've heard is that sometimes we've had very eminent people being considered, very successful people, but they simply haven't done anything, even in the broadest sense, relevant to medicine. So I mean, that I think that's the only useful thing I can add to what's been said. In that, so it should really be that it is, even if it's basic research, there should be a very clear link to how it would be helping in the medical context. that's all I wanted to add, really. And it's not just enough to be an eminent scientist.
Thank you. That may be the Royal Society's job. It's not ours to just look for that. Yeah, we're looking for something else. Thank you. Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. So I'm a mathematician, and I agree with everything that everybody said. I just want to add in that when I look at, for instance, a mathematical modeling thing, the two questions I'm asking are, has the technical advance been incremental or significant? And secondly, has the application resulted in the discovery of new biology, of new science? And is that discovery really significant? And what I find is that in my own field, I can very much judge that, even if it's not written. But as has been mentioned by a number of people, with the breadth of areas that we have to look at, it is difficult for me in other areas to see, is this an incremental thing, or is this actually a significant change? So being able to bring those sorts of things out would also help. And there's nothing wrong with an incremental change in a technical thing that's led to a huge impact. But if that is stated, then it's clear how the work, it puts the work in context, basically. So that's the only thing I've got to add to what everybody else has said.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful, because actually, how does the committee tease out that incremental contribution? So if you can help the committee with that will really boost that nomination chance, I think. Great, thanks. Danny.
Thanks, Jessica, and I'll try to avoid repeating. I'm on Sectional Committee 4, and there were some interesting comments that I thought were important. And one of the things was overstating your contribution to findings sometimes caused anxiety. So I think clearly in the setting of team science, it's very important that we acknowledge that we haven't done everything, but be clear about our contribution without overstating. So that was one thing. And then, although we've touched on publications and the idea of team science and making it clear what the contribution is very important, that there was a flavor still that you needed to have a mix of maybe publications where you were contributing to, but also somewhere it was clear that you'd led substantially. So although it's not all about senior author, where there were not some senior author that seemed to cause some anxiety. So getting that publication mix right is useful. Repeatedly, the additionality, not just the science, came up, and we've touched on that. And then the final 2 points were the references. So I think the references really impacted the decisions, and I got the impression that where the references had knowledge of the field and the person, they were much more powerful. And often, if your nominators are fellows from your specialty, you therefore reduce the pool of people who could act as your referee for the external assessment. So I guess my thought on that is to maybe avoid the nominators all in your own field, so that if you're shortlisted for external peer review, there are fellows who know of your work in your field, if that makes sense. And then the final point was, and it's been touched on briefly, making sure the person's in the right committee. And again, there was one or two very eminent people who were looked at, but they'd probably moved from being research active as much to being more nationally representative, and they may not have been in the right committee. So I think the nominator really does need to think carefully about what's the right committee. So that's all I had.
Yeah, all important points. Thank you, Danny. And that careful balance between clarity over contribution and hyperbole that that actually overclaims is tricky, but it's important nonetheless. Yeah, so thank you for that one, Gary, and then we'll open up for any questions from anybody.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So I've been on Sectional Committee 7 for some years, which is quite a diverse group of candidates we look at, and I'm due to take over the chair of that committee from Jessica. I would emphasise the importance of understanding, particularly for our committee, the where that individual's work sits in relation to their peers. It's really hard for us to judge because unless we have that. The second, I think in our committee, the impact is very, very important. And I suspect some people might do better if they've done a lot of policy work or their work's been very impactful on practice, actually thinking about Sectional Committee 7, even though their academic discipline might be in one of the other committees. That's a general comment. And I think the point about being clear about what their distinct academic contribution is, I think is key, and the point many people have made about leading and what is supporting. But I'd say on our committee, the H index is kind of irrelevant in comparing people. It just doesn't help at all because it is such a varied pool of candidates.
Yeah, that's right. And that thing about committee choice, I think, is very important. And Committee 7 is an important one because we, on Committee 7, are able to really look at leadership contribution in a wide sense. And again, it's a very open context for that to be looked at. So that's useful for people to know. Great. Well, we've got a few minutes before we're going to take a break. So would anybody like to raise a question or make a point who's been listening so far? Paul, I think your mic.
Yeah, look, I've got a question that relates to procedure that I think is very relevant to the diversity issue. Now, I've got a colleague not at my university who was nominated at the same time I was, which was, I don't know, about 10 years or so ago, and she went through the 5 years and then gap and then several further years. But she had 4 children, and so her career was slowed down. And I've noticed that she now is super sexy. You know, she's just got a Welcome Investigator Award, a whole bunch of really exciting papers. And my impression is she's fallen off our AMS nomination procedure because of the 5+, which I think for some people might be too short a window. Do you see what I mean?
Right, let's turn to Russell and say, is there something we need to do on that? Because there is an absolute limit in the end to nomination years, isn't there, Russell? So do you want to just comment on that?
Yeah, so it is a 5-2-3 cycle. So you come in for 5 years, first of all, then you have to be out for 2 before you can come back in. And each time you come back in, you're back in 3 years. We are going to make some changes actually to the guidelines around CVs and things this year, to further highlight, because we haven't really done that much, to highlight career breaks and time off for children and that kind of thing. So we're going to ask for that kind of information more than we have done before. But there is actually no limit about how many times people can come back. So we've had fellows elected in their 3rd nomination, so they've been in something like 12 different years or something.
Okay.
So there is no limit. You can keep coming back after a 2-3 gap.
Okay, good. I thought it was 5 gap, 3 stop.
No, there's no limit.
We might not be making that clear enough, because actually the case you describe with that kind of complicated career history with breaks is a classic inclusivity issue, isn't it? And
absolutely. I think it's not an uncommon scenario, particularly for one group of scientists, you know, women.
Yeah. And then suddenly, you know, things
blossom
accelerate
when the kids have left home.
Absolutely, and we should absolutely be able to recognise an individual like that. So that's great. We'll make it clearer that that's possible, and the invitation to sort of rethink about coming back in. David Beach.
I find that quite a few candidates have contributed importantly in several different areas. And then they asked me, should they try to reflect all of those areas in their 500-word statement, or should they be more singular in terms of a story? So what might be best, or are there a variety of options there?
Yeah, that's tricky, isn't it? And again, I guess it's about making the decision about what you're going to sort of focus on in terms of this individual nominated candidate. You know, is it because of a range of leadership things that sit on top of a great scientific career? Or is it actually one or more of those areas that when you put them all together, I don't think there's a single answer. It could be either, it's just the crafting of it to tell the story is crucial, I think. That would be my thought, but maybe somebody else will come back with an idea. Angela, let's turn to you. Is your mic on?
Yeah, sorry. I haven't been on any of your committees, but I've been on Section 10 at the Royal Society, and we have many of the same problems, of course, as you do. And we're also very keen that everybody's work has made a difference, which essentially is what you're also saying. My only comments otherwise then is that one of them is sometimes I think people are first nominated too early. Sometimes regrettably it's too late. They've done a lot, but it's in the past and people aren't that interested any longer, even though they did have impact at the time. So I think advice on how you decide the best time to nominate somebody is really quite, well, it would be good if there was some way of getting some advice on that. I think. I'm not sure whether it's possible. The other thing which I've noticed for very good reasons, that it's not uncommon to find a situation where two people have really led all the work and one gets the nominations and the awards and the other one doesn't. And I think that quite often it's the man who does and the woman who doesn't. And there is, we already ought to be very aware of that. And I think we should be very, if anything, slightly more positive towards those people who have a long history of being co-leaders, really, of a very successful group. So those are just a couple of comments.
Yeah, great points. And that applies absolutely in this setting, I think. I'd like to think that we are inclusive, open-minded, try and look around all of those issues. I guess it is a job for people to nominate, isn't it? If there's a co-leadership situation and we're overlooking somebody who made a contribution, we need our nominators to search them out and find them. And that's, again, trying to do this diversity of who we can look at. So thank you for those points. Now, we've got probably time for, I think, one more before we take a break. I'm going to go to Nicola.
Hi, thanks. Yes, I've actually got two really quick questions. One is about the committees and, can you hear me all right? Yeah, okay. One is about the committees. So do members of the committee have to go out of the room when somebody from their institution is being discussed? And the second one was about publications. If you've written a really comprehensive review article that is used for teaching purposes and has been cited a lot, is that worth including or not?
So a couple of things Russell might want to comment. Yes, we handle conflicts very carefully, and no one from the same institution or with a personal connection or whatever would be in the room during a discussion. So that's very carefully managed. On the review article, well, Russell might want to comment, but I think it could be worth including. It's got to have made a groundbreaking contribution that would be, you know, very, very impactful, and that would be demonstrated through it if you're going to choose it. But yes, it would be fine if it qualified in that sense. Russell, was there anything you would add to that?
No, not really. I mean, there's no limits on what you can include as examples by our candidates. I would just say, if you're going to include something like that, to make it clear in the summary of achievements what that actually, that's explained on the impact it's had. And as for conflicts, yeah, the conflicted committee members always have to step out of the room. But candidates discussed.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's been a really good conversation so far. We're now going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene at 11:36, if that's okay. And we're going to have some more opportunity to discuss together and in groups when we come back. So see you at 11:36. There we are. Yep. So just to alert you to the fact that we're recording again. So I hope you managed to grab a cup of tea or coffee, and that you're ready to start our conversation again. Now we're going to sort of turn to the subject of diversity in nominations, which obviously has come up already. This is something we're very, very keen to encourage. And Vivien, you're going to just talk to us a little bit about how fellows could be more visible and encourage nominations from as diverse a range of individuals, backgrounds, characteristics and locations around the country as possible. So Vivien.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello all, it's really lovely to meet you all. I'll back virtually. Bear with me and I'll share screen. But as Jessica mentioned, we'll have a discussion about how you can make yourselves more visible so that we can encourage diverse nominations across all protected characteristics, including regions. So, okay, so I'm Vivien Kintu. I'm the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Manager. It's lovely to meet you all. I have 5 years of EDI experience, 5 years of governance experience, and I joined the Academy in October. So this is one of the first times that I get to meet a lot of good fellows. So it's really lovely to meet you all and to hear about your different concerns and discussions around the fellowship election, which we will all take on board as we start to work on how to better support you through the process. So in terms of equity and diversity and inclusion, I'm going to talk to you a little bit through our working definition at the Academy of EDI, and then we'll talk a little bit about our new strategy and how we've embedded EDI into our 10-year strategy. I will go on to create an EDI strategy with underneath that for a 3-year period, so through within the 10-year period, and then how you can increase your visibility and awareness within your institutions to encourage diverse nominations, and then how in turn we can support you with that. So in terms of the work of EDI and what I do, our starting base is the Equality Act 2010. You can see the quote there. Just to note that the Equality Act is outdated. It is 12 years old. Its initial focus is around the employment sector, but for my purposes, of course, that is much wider and spread across all ways and processes in which people live and work. So in terms of equity, we consider strongly whether the term should be equity as opposed to equality. However, equality refers to creating an equal platform for everyone, whereas equity is adjusting the platform to meet the individual needs of people to create an equal platform overall. So keeping it to equity was a very conscious decision that we made at the Academy. Previously mentioned, we start with the protected characteristics under the Equality Act, which you can see listed there. But as I mentioned, the Equality Act is out of date. So there's a lot of areas that would be considered that go above and beyond, such as, for instance, mental health would be drawn out much more than just past disability, neurodiversity, etc. So for our purposes and our work, we have expanded on mental health and neurodiversity, and we have included the following areas, which are bespoke to the Academy, so regional representation, care and responsibilities, and social mobility. This isn't an exhaustive list and will grow and expand or change depending on the needs of the Academy, so it is live. And of course, throughout those discussions, it's to bear in mind that the concept of intersectionality and that we all have multiple identities within that. So I myself, for instance, I'm a Black woman, so I would fall within both of those characteristics. So just being very conscious of the fact that we all have multiple definitions of how we identify when we're looking at increasing diverse nominations. And then finally, inclusion, just making sure that we all have a seat at the table to be the expert leading voice in biomedical health and research. So the Academy launched this week its 10-year strategy, which I hope you have all seen. I will share the link within that. And we have firmly embedded EDI within that 10-year strategy and our values and outcomes. So you can see our values listed there. And within that is that we are inclusive and actively seek out diversity in all its forms. So that is diversity of individuals, diversity of expertise, diversity of thought. And that by 2023, we do aim to have a fellowship and an online network that is more reflective of the society that we serve. That is an ongoing goal. It's not an end goal, if you will. It's something that we'll continue to work on actively throughout. We will be working on creating an EDI strategy underneath that. So it will be a 3-year strategy that we're hoping to be able to release by late autumn, early winter. And that will use the basis of our diversity values principles, which you can see listed there. And again, I can share later on the link to those. So increasing diverse nominations and what we would ask from you at this stage. I'm working closely with Russell and Ravana to see the ways that we can engage regional champions and regional work to increase this. In the meantime, we ask that consider the following. So making yourself known and visible as a potential academy nominee. So hopefully this should work to remove some of the onus from you as having to be the ones to seek out diverse nominations. So what we ask is that you make yourself known within your institutions that you are an academy fellow, and that makes you visible and people can start to approach you as we then do the work internally in terms of a communications campaign. Reaching out to your EDI professionals. So those are, my equivalents, my peers, and I can definitely support you with that. They will know the lay of your land and your area, the diversity stats. They'll have those relationships. So working with them is a way to begin to increase diverse nominations, but also to get an idea of the diversity within your institution, which is not always visible. Reaching out to your staff network. So again, that all goes under the lens of making yourself visible, but also being aware of some of the hesitations that diverse candidates may face, and just the general ethos and values and the feeling on the land will really help you increase that visibility and awareness and encourage those nominations. Considering issues on the ground and how we can support you. So this is your academy and I am your EDI manager. Please do utilize that relationship and get in contact. I can help you build those relationships. If you have some challenges, I can help you face those. I can liaise with your EDI managers. We can have those communications going. So we're not asking you to do this alone. We'll work with you to do it. Keeping the doors of communications open. We will work with you to get election messaging out, which I'll discuss in a little bit. But if you keep your door open so that candidates can approach you, it may be candidates that are not thinking of putting themselves up yet. So they may be putting themselves out in a year or two, but just keeping that line of communication open, again, so that people can approach you rather than you having to seek them out, will really, really help. And then finally, just an encouragement to look at EDI as a whole rather than one characteristic at a time. So bear in mind, again, that diversity is not always visible. So do build those relationships with your EDI leads and staff networks and look out for diversity in all of its forms. And again, we can help you with that if you reach out to us. So expanding a little bit more on how we can help you. We are working to demystify the election process. So sessions like this, we'll work on comms campaigns, we'll pull out some material from this session to help you to be able to communicate to lay people. So, the EDI leads that are not as daily engaged, candidates who are perhaps not as engaged with the academy, what the process is, what the elections are, and the benefits of becoming an academy, of joining the fellowship and becoming an academy. So we will support you in that. We'll be doing a communications campaign around the elections, so we'll get the word out early that the elections are coming, and likewise you'll then be able to pick up those communications and share them within your institutions to get that word out and encourage applicants to come to you. We can support you with any EDI communications. So if you want to reach out to your EDI leads, your staff networks, you're not going as far as you think you could, please do reach out to us or reach out to me. I can support you with that. And we can get that message through. We can bring you in touch with our regional champions, as mentioned before, so that you can build those relationships on the ground, but also so that you can have some additional support if you want to communicate you know, what the election process is and all the things that you heard here around, you know, citations, make sure that your work is up to date. Again, you don't have to do it alone. We can do it with you, and the regional champions can support you through that. And then finally, you will have candidates, and this isn't just around diverse candidates, but just around the concept of inclusivity in general. You'll have candidates come up to you who are not ready for election yet. We have programs where we can support them. So again, keep those windows of communications open and bring them onto one of our programs. We have programs supporting women, we have programs supporting future leaders, we have mentoring schemes. We'll be able to prepare them. So if they're not ready yet, do encourage them to still build relationships with the academy, get into one of the programs, and we can support them to make that final leap. So that is it for now in terms of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I suppose if I'm to leave you with one final thought, it is to make yourself visible so that the candidates come to you, while we support on the ground to help you with the communications. And again, to just utilize the relationship that you have with the academy and with myself so that we can support you on the ground to reach those diverse audiences. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Vivien. That's really helpful. And I think that, you know, there's something that you've just told us, which I think is quite groundbreakingly different, in that this is not about us seeking out the people that we kind of know because we know them and they look like the rest of us, what we expect a fellow to look like. This is about us being visible so that people come to us, isn't it? It's turning it around, because we don't know everybody. We don't know everybody that has got something to bring to the academy. And we've got to make it really easy for them to come to us, or people to bring them towards us.
I mean, precisely, you know. Yes, there are more of you guys and a lot more of them. So just making yourselves visible and open will make all of you, and then use the contacts, leads, your staff networks. But yeah, just making yourself visible, making yourself known that you are a fellow of the academy will make a load of difference, and the candidates can start to come to you, and you can start to then decide how you move from there.
Brilliant. Okay, and we're going to be doing quite a bit of work to try and up the communications and the visibility of this whole process. So to aid that too. So thanks very much, Vivien. Well, no doubt we'll come back to this subject. So we're now going to start talking together in breakout rooms, and each breakout room is going to be facilitated by a member of academy staff and also a regional champion. So this is the moment where you can talk together and think about any issues you want to raise, or any just discussing how we might do this more and optimize our nominations for success. So I think, Russell, I'm just going to hand over to you just to tell us what will happen next.
Yeah, that's right. You're all about to be sent off into breakout rooms. So I'll open those now. You have about 20 minutes.
About 15 or 20 minutes, I think.
Yeah, about 20 minutes in total, I think. Yeah. Okay, I'll open them now. Oh, there we are. I haven't put you in a room, Jessica. I didn't know if you wanted to, or you wanted to have a break from chair.
Oh, I think I was going to ask you, but it's quite useful just to sort of, because you're sort of trying to orchestrate it a bit. It's hard if you're then zooming backwards and forwards. Yeah.
But going quite well, I think.
Yeah. I'm just interested to know whether there's some little glitches that make the recording of it, using what we have of it a bit later, you know, how thank you for staying for this last part of our masterclass. So I'm now going to give the chance for each of your groups to give us some feedback on what you were discussing, and I'm just going to take each of the 4 groups in turn. So can we start with group number 1? Who's going to feedback from group number 1?
I think that were we number 1? Yes, we were. Thank you, Bob.
All right. Okay. I've got some very rough notes. We basically had quite a lot of discussion about the process of nomination and too many people from some places. The question of getting a good spread of nominations from different groups of people. And also, once people had been nominated, the degree to which maybe they should receive some feedback on the status of what was referred to repeatedly in the group as their applications. I mean, it seemed to me, and I put a point in from here from experience in the Royal Society, that these were nominations, not applications. And one of the problems was that if people didn't know the status of their application and whether they'd got shortlisted, for example, and they weren't formally told, whether there should be some way of people knowing how far they got in the process year by year. A point that I was waiting to make at the end, I mean, it almost sounded to me in the discussion we had in that group like not being elected was failure. Whereas to my mind, being elected is success, and not being elected, being nominated is a form of success as well. And I'm going to stop there. I haven't fully covered all that was said in the group, but there was a real concern about not identifying people who weren't in centres where there was a concerted action to nominate lots of colleagues. And it seemed to me again that actually you should be finding people to nominate, not from your institution, but from areas you know people anywhere. I think, does anybody from our group want to come in and tell me I've done a terrible job?
Nobody voting for that. No, that was a great job. Well done. Yeah.
Well, it's not to say that, Bob, you've done a bad job. Entirely the contrary. But I think it was just to support the view that having lists of candidates within a particular institution and supporting all of them is not conducive to diversity and giving everybody a good opportunity.
It's not what the Academy should be about.
Something that Tom from Liverpool raised was the idea of if you nominate one from your own institution, then perhaps the rule is that a second nomination would be somebody from elsewhere. And I rather like the clarity, simplicity, and fairness of that, actually.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I love the fact that you in your group have come with that spirit of saying, actually, our responsibility is to the whole sector of biomedical and health science and celebrating it wherever it is, rather than I'm doing a job within my institution, for my close colleagues. I think that's, if we could convey that spirit of what we want our fellowship community to be doing, that would be very, very powerful.
Yep.
So yeah, so thank you, because in a way you're telling us that that's what you want to do, not just that it's sort of an ideal that we might set somewhere, you know, at the centre of the Academy, because obviously it takes all of us to act like that, doesn't it? But that's brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. Let's go to group number 2.
Hi, I think that was us. So I'm just going to very quickly read back some of the notes that we made from our discussion. We spoke about there was an onus on the nominator to write their own citations, and it was important to keep your nomination updated. We also had a discussion about the impact a particular person has made, and what would be missing if that person wasn't around. the 300-word citation is critical. And I guess as a group, they were saying that as fellows, they need to raise awareness collectively and to promote the work of the Academy. And there's a broader message there about our purpose as the Academy. So far, they found the masterclass very useful, and it would be quite good if this could perhaps become an annual event going forward.
Thank you, Ribana. That's again some really interesting and good messages. Does anybody else from Group 2 want to add to Ribana's feedback? No, I think you've captured it. Great. We'll move on to group number 3.
Thanks, Jessica. That was Aaron. So we had a really good discussion. Anyone from my group, please do jump in. So we discussed the nominations masterclass and how it was actually useful to have the clarity from the Academy in a simple format, but also the back end to be able to take these messages from the nominations masterclass into people's individual institutions, what people found quite useful. We had a useful discussion around citations, where those are low and how you would be able to communicate that, where someone's work is more long-term, and that we could perhaps work a little bit more to offer a little more guidance around the number of citations that one provides and how a bit lower. We had a discussion around the disabled community and how to encourage nominations from people with disabilities while offering flexibility and understanding that they may have taken more career breaks or that they work in a different way. So how we give them the space to be able to communicate that through the application process without cluttering their CV. So we're wondering whether there was something that would be able to provide in ELEX to do that as an addition. And then we had a really good discussion around impact and how you measure impact, particularly where it is more long-term as opposed to short-term, and how you kind of express that through. And I think that is a very, very quick summary of what we kind of had. I'll share the detailed notes, but does anyone from my group want to jump in if I said any of that wrong or they want to add in? Thank you.
Great, and again, there's some new points, and I think, yeah, absolutely. We'll turn to Russell about exactly how we could quickly do something that encourages this sort of statement around things that have impacted your career breaks, or factors that have sort of made things different for your journey. I think that would be a very strong thing to do, and particularly thinking about, as you said in your presentation, invisible challenges that we can't just pick up from a questionnaire or whatever, that we need to be bringing forward so that we give special consideration to people. And encouraged to apply and not think that you could never get there, I think, isn't it? Or find somebody to nominate you. So thanks for that. Okay, shall we move finally to group 4?
So that was me. We had a good, interesting chat, and one of the first things we discovered was that everybody in the group had made nominations, but no one had made successful nominations. And actually, I imagine most of the people who've come along today have come because they wanted to learn more. So I'm leaving with a way of thinking, how can we link people who have either not nominated or haven't yet made successful nominations with people who have made successful nominations. We also, actually, I guess some of the conversation was around the responsibility of fellows. When you make a nomination, it's a bit of work, it's quite a bit of work, but the more work you put in, the more it pays off. One of the terms someone used in the group was perhaps actually, if you've been too casual about making the nomination in the first place, you realise once you've been through the cycle the first time how much work you need to put in. We had a bit of a chat about how we can make that as easy as possible for people to nominate. And actually the big thing that came out of that was the best thing to make it easy is to get more feedback, and as much feedback that we can have, so that people can actually either think, actually, should I put this person in for another round, or is it too soon? Have I nominated them at the wrong time? But also so that they can kind of keep improving the nominations each year. we liked the point that Russell made earlier on about how actually, you know, people get in across all years of nomination. It's not that if you don't get in the first year, you're never going to get in. It is a sort of looking at it as a long-term process. Other things on feedback and communications about the process, we hope that we might be able to work on better ways to automate communications, just so that people who are in the process at various points throughout the year know what's going on, know where they're at. It's actually quite hard to understand the timelines when you are coming to the process quite fresh. So that more comms around sort of what's happening in year and what's going on with the process. And I guess one of the hardest conversations that we had without necessarily any solutions was, how do you make those conversations at sectional committees about the individuals and not about the personalities who might have been reviewing them or representing them at the table. And we did talk about the fact that it's good that membership of committees rotates, people staying in the pool for a long time. So actually each year you do get seen by different people. But a few people were sort of sharing experiences of actually, you know, how one person's view might change from one year to the next, depending on who's around the table. And I think that was all of our points. Anyone in my group have any other points to chip in, please do.
No, well, that again is another really important and useful set of thoughts as to how we can do more and do better. I mean, I think really that a lot of your conversation was about sort of demystifying and almost, you know, taking out of the sort of it seeming like a secret process that you can't really have any insight into, that somehow something comes out the other end and you don't really even know what it is relating to your nomination personally. So, you know, it doesn't need to be secret. On the other hand, it is confidential, and people don't always, you know, we've got to be careful about that. So we've rather steered away from giving direct individual, say, written feedback because of the complications of that. But I like the idea of maybe nominators being able to access Russell, for example, to say, where's this at and how is it really happened? Anything you could tell me that I would do better with this one? Russell, do you want to just comment on that? Because I think that sort of feeling that there's a sort of almost a helpline. It might just be Russell, obviously, which is maybe a lot of work for him. But that's the idea that you've got a hotline to somebody who has insights and can feed something back to you, I think could be helpful to nominators. Russell, do you want to say something about whether you think that's feasible?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, nominators can always call me about anything they want to. The whole feedback issue is difficult. I think it's a bit of a can of worms. But again, I don't want to offer any false hope. You know, if someone was close last year, and I might say, well, you should keep them in. There's a whole batch of new candidates the next year, so you never know that they're guaranteed success. But if anyone can approach me about any details about their candidate, and I can share what I can. But the whole giving feedback to everyone is a very difficult one to do, I think.
And probably not on its own productive, because actually the general principles and guidance is probably more useful than trying to sort of specify for any given individual what would make all the difference to them, because I don't think it can be specified, and we couldn't guarantee any outcome of that specification either, could we, Russell?
That's it, yeah.
So it's better to be more generic, but on the other hand, if there are certain things around, you know, simply the matter that this nomination hadn't been updated for 3 years, it's good to know that. So that sort of information is perfectly available, I think. So, well, we're almost out of time. So John is asking just whether it's possible for nominators and candidates to know whether they've actually reached the shortlisting stage. Russell, what do you think about that? Because at the moment that isn't made known, is it?
No, we don't make that available. Again, it's that offer of false hope again, isn't it? Say, yes, your candidate was shortlisted last year. There's no guarantee that they will be the next year. But it will, I suppose it will offer some encouragement that they are there or thereabouts, and that they should update for any new things to add. for the next year. But as I say, I don't want to say, yes, they were close, so you'll definitely be in next year or anything like that.
No, because it's as you say, it's a new competition every year, isn't it? In every
There's new candidates every year, so
yeah. But lots of food for thought on all of that, but certainly sort of opening this up so that it's less sort of a mystery, and feels sort of like it's an open process, I think, again, is just generally good for encouraging people to keep at it. And the spirit of you all as nominators to think that there's a lot of point. I mean, it's interesting that we had that one group discussion where everybody has only had unsuccessful nominations. So that doesn't really inspire you to keep going, does it, if that's how it's worked out? So, well, thank you to everybody. I think it's been, for me, actually, it's been very useful and been good to spend this time talking about the whole process, what we can do, how we can improve it, and how we can make it better known. Thank you all for coming to spend time to do that, because without you, this process doesn't work. We will certainly be doing a lot with the material. We'll use this, we hope, to make it into a resource that can be passed around and shared, and make the recording of this available to other people who might want to watch it. It won't be long before we'll be entering the next cycle. So look forward to you joining in with that.